The studio lights burned bright, casting a warm glow over the set of the Kelly Clarkson show. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their chatter filling the air as Kelly Clarkson stepped onto the stage, her signature smile lighting up the room. She waved, her energy infectious, and the crowd roared back, ready for another episode of her blend of humor, heart, and unfiltered conversation. Today's guest was Mark Wahlberg, the Hollywood heavyweight known for his gritty roles, quick wit, and a reputation for never shying away from speaking his mind. Kelly, in her opening monologue, teased the interview with her usual charm, joking about Mark's intense workout routines and his knack for stealing scenes in every movie he touched. The audience laughed, but there was an undercurrent, a faint ripple of tension in the air that nobody could quite place. Backstage, Mark paced in the green room, his usual confident swagger tinged with something else, a restlessness. His team hovered nearby, adjusting his jacket, offering water, but he waved them off, his jaw tight. He'd done countless talk shows, from Kimmel to Fallon, and he knew the drill. Keep it light, plug the movie, flash a smile. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was the questions he'd heard Kelly might ask, ones that dug a little deeper than he liked. Or maybe it was the call he'd gotten that morning, a cryptic message from an old friend that left him on edge. Whatever it was, Mark wasn't in the mood for fluff. Kelly wrapped her monologue, and the stage manager signaled for Mark to head out. He strode onto the set, the crowd erupting as he flashed a tight smile and gave a quick wave. Kelly greeted him with a hug, her warmth genuine, but Mark's response was clipped, his eyes scanning the audience like he was sizing them up. They settled into the plush chairs, the set designed to feel like a cozy living room, though the cameras and lights betrayed the illusion. Kelly started easy, asking about his latest action flick, a high-octane thriller that had critics buzzing. Mark leaned back, his answers polished but curt, like he was reading from a script he didn't fully believe in. The audience laughed at his quips about dodging explosions, but Kelly, ever perceptive, caught the edge in his voice. She pivoted, her tone still light but probing, asking about the balance between his Hollywood career and his personal life, something about raising his kids in the spotlight. Mark's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. He shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "It's tough, you know," he said, his Boston accent thicker than usual. "People think they get you, but they don't. They see the movies, the red carpets, but they don't see the real stuff." Kelly nodded, her eyes locked on his, sensing there was more beneath the surface. She leaned in, her voice softening. "What's the real stuff, Mark? What's the part we don't see?" The question hung in the air, and the audience went quiet, waiting. Mark's jaw clenched, and for a moment, it looked like he might brush it off with a joke. But then he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You want real? People love to judge, Kelly. They love to tear you down when you're up, but they don't know what it takes to stay there." His tone was sharp, not angry yet, but pointed, like a blade testing its edge. Kelly tilted her head, unfazed, her years as a host giving her the instincts to navigate choppy waters. "I hear you," she said, "but sometimes opening up, letting people in, it humanizes you. Don't you think that's part of it?" Mark let out a short laugh, almost a scoff. "Humanize, that's a nice word for it. Sounds like a trap to me." The audience shifted, a murmur rippling through them. Kelly kept her smile, but her eyes flicked to the stage manager off camera, a silent check-in. She wasn't rattled, not yet, but she knew she was treading into uncharted territory. Mark wasn't playing the game the way guests usually did, and the air in the studio was starting to feel like it was charged with static, ready to spark. The static in the studio air thickened as Kelly Clarkson leaned back in her chair, her smile steady but her eyes sharp, reading Mark Wahlberg's tension like a seasoned navigator charting a storm. The audience's murmur faded, their attention locked on the exchange unfolding before them. Kelly, ever the professional, sensed the moment teetering on a knife's edge but chose to press forward, her voice calm yet deliberate. "A trap, huh?" she said, tilting her head with a playful glint that didn't quite mask her curiosity. "Come on, Mark, you've been in this game long enough. You know sharing a bit of the real you only makes people root for you more. So, what's holding you back?" Mark's fingers stopped drumming on the armrest, his hands now gripping the chair like he was bracing for impact. His eyes flicked to the audience, then back to Kelly, and for a split second, something raw flashed across his face, vulnerability or anger. It was hard to tell. "What's holding me back?" he repeated, his voice low, almost a growl. "Maybe I don't trust the room, Kelly. Maybe I know how this works. You get me to spill my guts, and tomorrow it's headlines, twisted into something I didn't mean." The crowd stirred, a few gasps cutting through the silence. Kelly's eyebrows lifted, but she didn't flinch, her Texas grit kicking in as she held his gaze. "Twisted," she said, her tone still warm but with a slight edge now. "Mark, this is a safe space. We're just talking, you and me. Nobody's out to get you." She gestured to the audience, who nodded along, their support palpable. But Mark wasn't buying it. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his posture all intensity. Safe space. That's what they all say. Then you say something real, and it's clipped, mimed, turned into a soundbite for clicks. I've seen it happen, not falling for it. His words landed like a punch, and the audience's energy shifted, some nodding in agreement, others whispering. Unsure where this was going, Kelly, undeterred, shifted gears, her instincts telling her to defuse but not retreat. Okay, fair, she said, spreading her hands. You've got a point. The world can be brutal with words. But let's pivot. You're here to talk about your new movie, right? Tell us about the role. What drew you to it? She was giving him an out, a chance to steer back to safer ground. But Mark's eyes darkened, like he saw the pivot for what it was, a sidestep. The movie, he said, his voice flat. Sure, it's about a guy who fights for what's his, doesn't let anyone push him around. Maybe I relate to that a little too much today. The crowd laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke or a jab. Kelly caught the undertone and decided to lean into it, her curiosity outweighing caution. Relate how? She asked, her voice softer now, inviting. You're Mark Wahlberg. You've built this empire. Movies, businesses, family. What's got you feeling like you're fighting for something? It was a bold move, and the audience leaned in, the air heavy with anticipation. Mark's jaw tightened, and he ran a hand over his face, like he was wrestling with how much to say. You want to know what I'm fighting? He said, his voice rising just enough to carry weight. I'm fighting the idea that I owe everyone a piece of me. That I've got to play nice, smile for the cameras, pretend I'm not human. I'm tired of it, Kelly. The audience gasped, louder this time, and a few clapped, drawn to his raw honesty. Kelly's smile faded, not out of fear, but respect. Though her eyes flicked to the stage manager again, a silent signal that things were veering off script. I get it, she said, her voice steady. Nobody wants to feel like they're in a box, but Mark, you're in the spotlight because people care. They want to know you, not just the action hero. Mark shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. They don't want me, Kelly. They want the story they can sell. The words hung heavy, and the studio felt smaller, the lights hotter, as the tension coiled tighter, ready to snap. The studio lights seemed to burn hotter as Mark Wahlberg's words echoed, his bitter smile fading into a hard stare that pinned Kelly Clarkson to her chair. The audience was caught in a strange limbo, some nodding at Mark's defiance, others shifting uncomfortably, sensing the interview spiraling into something raw, unscripted. Kelly, her instincts honed from years of navigating live TV, kept her composure, but her eyes held a flicker of caution. She leaned forward, her voice steady, deliberate, like she was reaching out to pull Mark back from the edge. I hear you, Mark, she said, her Texas drawl softening the words. Nobody's saying you owe anyone anything. But you're here, right? You showed up. That means something. So, let's talk about what's real for you. No headlines, just us. Mark's eyes narrowed, his posture rigid, like a fighter sizing up an opponent. He let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. What's real? He said, his voice low, cutting. Real is knowing every word I say here gets dissected, turned into some narrative I didn't sign up for. Real is dealing with people who think they know me because they saw me in a movie or read some article. You want real, Kelly? I'm tired of playing the game. The audience stirred, a mix of gasps and murmurs rippling through the crowd. A few clapped, drawn to his unfiltered edge, but others looked to Kelly, waiting for her to steer the ship back to safety. Kelly tilted her head, her smile gone now, replaced by a look of genuine concern. I get that it's exhausting, she said, her voice quieter, almost intimate. The spotlight's a beast, but you're not just a movie star to these folks. She gestured to the audience, who nodded, some calling out in support. They see you, Mark, the guy who came from nothing, who built something. That's why they're here. So maybe, just for a moment, you can let them in, not the headlines, but them. It was a deft move, redirecting the focus to the audience, reminding Mark of the human connection in the room. But Mark wasn't biting. He leaned back, crossing his arms, his face a mask of skepticism. Let them in, he said, his tone sharp, enough to cut glass. You think they want the real me. They want the guy who's up at 4 a.m, grinding, dealing with the noise of this industry, the constant pressure to be something I'm not. Nah, they want the action hero, the funny guy, the one who fits their box. His voice rose, not shouting, but forceful, each word landing like a stone. The audience went quiet, the air thick with tension, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Kelly's eyes flicked to the side, catching the stage manager's subtle signal to wrap things up, maybe cut to commercial. But Kelly wasn't one to back down. She leaned in closer, her voice firm but kind. Mark, I'm not here to put you in a box. I'm here to talk, to listen. So tell me, what's got you so guarded today? Something's weighing on you, I can feel it. It was a gamble, pushing him to open up in front of a live audience, but Kelly's sincerity was her strength, and the crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. Mark's jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for an exit. For a moment, it seemed like he might shut down, retreat behind the wall he'd built, but then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, though it carried through the microphones. You want to know what's weighing on me? I got a call this morning. Someone I trusted, someone I thought had my back, trying to drag up old stuff, personal stuff, to use it against me. That's what I'm dealing with, Kelly. That's why I'm not in the mood for this. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath, as the weight of his words settled over the room. Kelly's eyes widened, but she didn't break contact. Her silence, an invitation for him to keep going, even as the studio's tension reached a breaking point. The studio fell into a hush, Mark Wahlberg's whispered confession, hanging in the air like smoke, heavy and impossible to ignore. The audience, frozen, waited for Kelly Clarkson to respond, their eyes darting between her and Mark, whose gaze was locked on the floor, his hands now clasped tightly in his lap. Kelly's face softened, her years of hosting giving her the instinct to tread carefully, but her curiosity, her need to connect, pushed her forward. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a murmur, matching his intensity. Mark, that sounds heavy, she said, her tone laced with empathy. Someone trying to drag up your past. That's not fair. You don't have to share more, but if you want to, I'm listening. We're all listening. She gestured to the audience, who nodded, their silence a rare show of unity in a room usually buzzing with cheers. Mark's eyes flicked up, meeting hers, and for a moment, it seemed like he might open up, let the walls crack, just a little. But then his expression hardened, a flash of defiance cutting through the vulnerability. Listening, he said, his voice rising, sharp and biting. That's the problem, Kelly. Everyone's listening, waiting for me to slip, to give them something they can twist. I'm not here to air my laundry for the world to pick apart. The audience stirred, a few murmurs breaking the quiet, some in support, others in shock at the edge in his tone. Kelly's brows furrowed, but she didn't back down, her voice, steady, grounding. I'm not asking you to air anything, Mark, I'm just saying, sometimes talking it out, even a little, can take the weight off. You don't have to carry it alone. Mark let out a short, bitter laugh, shaking his head. Carry it alone. That's all I've ever done. You think this? He gestured to the set, the cameras, the audience. This makes it easier. It's a circus, Kelly, and I'm tired of being the main act. The words hit like a gut punch, and the audience gasped, the tension in the room spiking to a new high. Kelly's eyes widened, but she held her ground, her voice calm but firm. I get it. The spotlight's brutal. But you're here. You showed up. That's strength. Mark, don't sell yourself short. It was a plea, wrapped in encouragement, but Mark wasn't hearing it. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost menacing. Strength. Strength is knowing when to walk away from this game. The audience fell silent again, the weight of his words sinking in. Kelly's stage manager, off camera, was signaling frantically now, hands waving to cut to commercial, but Kelly ignored it, her focus locked on Mark. Walk away, she said, her voice softer, searching. You mean walk away from the show, or something bigger? It was a bold question, and the crowd held its breath, sensing the moment teetering on a precipice. Mark's eyes narrowed, his jaw working like he was chewing on his next words. Maybe both, he said finally, his voice cold. Final. I don't need this, Kelly. I don't need to sit here and play nice while someone out there is trying to tear me down. The studio erupted in murmurs, some audience members whispering to each other, others staring wide-eyed at the stage. Kelly's face remained composed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern, not for herself but for Mark, for where this was heading. Mark, nobody's tearing you down here, she said, her voice gentle but insistent. This is a conversation, not a fight. Stay with me. Let's talk this through. But Mark was already moving, his hands gripping the armrests as he pushed himself up, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm done talking, he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The audience gasped louder now, as Mark stood, towering over the set, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and resolve. Kelly stood too, her instincts kicking in, reaching out a hand as if to stop him. Mark, wait, she said, but he was already turning, heading for the wings, leaving the stage and the stunned audience in his wake. The studio was a frozen tableau, Mark Wahlberg's retreating figure casting a long shadow as he stormed toward the wings, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. The audience sat wide-eyed, their whispers swallowed by the weight of the moment, while Kelly Clarkson stood center stage, her outstretched hand hovering in the air, her face a mix of shock and determination. The cameras stayed locked on her, capturing every flicker of emotion as she processed Mark's abrupt exit. The stage manager, now visibly panicked, signaled for a commercial break, but Kelly shook her head, her instincts overriding protocol. She turned to the audience, her voice steady despite the chaos. Folks, we're gonna keep this real, she said, her Texas drawl grounding the room. That was intense, but we're not cutting away. Let's take a breath together. The audience responded with a smattering of applause, some still glancing toward the wings where Mark had disappeared. Kelly sat back down, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, scanning the crowd for a connection. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, "this job, it's about real moments, messy ones too. Mark's going through something, and I respect that. We all have days where the world feels heavy." Her words were met with nods, a few murmurs of agreement as the audience leaned into her sincerity. But backstage, the mood was anything but calm. In the green room, Mark was pacing again, his team hovering, unsure whether to approach. A producer rushed in, clipboard in hand, her voice low but urgent. "Mark, we need you back out there. We can smooth this over, maybe do a quick segment to wrap it up." Mark stopped, turning to her with a look that could have stopped a freight train. "Smooth it over," he said, his voice tight. "I'm not some puppet you can parade out to fix your show." "I said, I'm done." The producer flinched but held her ground, years of handling Hollywood egos giving her a spine of steel. "Nobody's saying you're a puppet, Mark, but walking off, that's a statement. You want to leave it like that?" Mark's eyes burned, but her words hit a nerve. He ran a hand over his face, his anger warring with something else. Maybe regret, maybe doubt. He hadn't planned to blow up like this, but that call from earlier, the one dragging up old wounds, had left him raw, exposed. He glanced at the monitor in the corner, showing Kelly on stage, talking to the audience with that effortless warmth, turning his meltdown into something human. For a second, he felt a pang, not guilt exactly, but a recognition that he'd let the moment slip out of his control. Back on stage, Kelly was keeping the audience engaged, pivoting to a lighter topic, a story about her own struggles with fame, her voice weaving a thread of relatability through the room. "Y'all, I've had days where I wanted to walk off too," she said, earning a ripple of laughter. "But you show up, you keep going, because that's what connects us." The crowd cheered, her ability to turn chaos into connection, a testament to her skill. But her eyes kept flicking to the wings, hoping Mark might reappear. Even as the seconds ticked by. In the green room, Mark made a decision. He turned to the producer, his voice low but resolute. "I'll go back out, but not for you, not for the show, for her." He nodded toward the monitor, where Kelly's face filled the screen. The producer exhaled, relief washing over her. But Mark wasn't done. "No more games," he said. "I'm doing this my way." He strode back toward the stage, his team trailing behind, unsure what to expect. The audience caught sight of him emerging from the wings, and a wave of gasps and applause broke out, the energy in the room shifting once more. Kelly turned, her face lighting up with surprise, then caution, as Mark approached, his expression unreadable, a storm still brewing but tempered by something new, a willingness to try again. The studio erupted in a mix of cheers and gasps as Mark Wahlberg stepped back onto the set, his presence commanding, yet different now. Less a storm and more a man wrestling with his own edges. Kelly Clarkson stood, her face a blend of relief and wariness, her smile cautious but genuine as she gestured to the chair he'd abandoned minutes ago. The audience's energy surged, their applause carrying a hope that the tension might resolve, that this raw, unscripted moment could find a landing. Mark didn't sit right away, standing at the edge of the stage, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Kelly. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the noise. "I came in here hot, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." The audience quieted, hanging on his words, their earlier unease giving way to a collective lean-in. Kelly's expression softened, her hands clasping in front of her as she nodded. "Mark, you don't owe me anything," she said, her voice steady, warm. "You're human, you're carrying something heavy. I'm just glad you're back." She gestured again to the chair, and this time, Mark sat, his posture less rigid, his hands resting loosely on his knees. The crowd clapped, a wave of support washing over the set, but Kelly raised a hand, silencing them gently. "Let's keep it real, y'all," she said, her eyes locked on Mark. "No pressure, just talk. What's on your mind?" Mark exhaled, running a hand over his jaw, his earlier fire-tempered but not gone. "I got a call this morning," he said, his voice measured, choosing each word with care. "Someone I used to trust, trying to stir up old stuff, personal stuff, to mess with me. It hit me hard, and I walked in here ready to fight the world." He paused, glancing at the audience, who were silent now, their attention absolute. "I'm not perfect," he continued. "I've made mistakes, plenty of them, but I've worked my whole life to move past them, to be better, for my family, for myself. And when someone tries to drag you back, it's like a punch you didn't see coming." Kelly nodded, her eyes never leaving his, her silence giving him space to keep going. "I hear that," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "And I think everyone here gets it. We've all got pasts, things we're not proud of. But you showing up, coming back out here, that's what matters." The audience murmured in agreement, a few clapping softly, their support palpable. Mark's lips twitched, not quite a smile but close, a crack in his armor. "Yeah, well," he said, You make it hard to stay mad. Kelly, you've got that thing, you know, making people feel like they're not alone. The crowd laughed, a gentle release of tension, and Kelly's smile widened, her eyes sparkling. That's the goal, she said, leaning back in her chair. So, let's switch gears. Talk about something lighter. Your movie, this character you play, he's a fighter too, right? Any of you in him? It was a smooth pivot, giving Mark an out to ease back into the interview, and he took it, his posture relaxing further. Yeah, he said, a spark of his usual charisma returning. He's a guy who doesn't quit, no matter what's thrown at him. Guess I can relate to that. The audience laughed again, louder this time, the room's energy lifting as Mark leaned into the moment, plugging his film with a story about a grueling stunt that left him bruised but grinning. The rest of the interview flowed smoother. Mark's edge softened by Kelly's warmth, her ability to steer without pushing. As the segment wrapped, the audience rose in a standing ovation, not just for Mark's star power but for the raw humanity they'd witnessed. Kelly hugged him, a real one this time, and Mark returned it, his earlier storm replaced by something quieter, steadier. As he left the stage, waving to the crowd, the lights dimmed and Kelly turned to the camera, her smile bright but knowing. That's what this show's about, y'all, she said. Real moments, real people. We'll be right back. The audience roared, and the screen faded to black, leaving the weight of the clash and its resolution lingering in the air.